What's up guys, and thank you for stopping by the channel. Today's project is this Murray lawnmower, and the problem is that it's been in storage for a long time and now it won't start. Let's take a good look at it and see if we can find out what's wrong with it, and hopefully we can fix it. In this video we repair this lawnmower. However, it may not be the exact repair that you need to make to yours. We'll explore other options later in the video. We have very little history on this mower, which isn't ideal, but of course it's probably typical of most mowers that you might get. The most we know is that it wasn't used in a couple of years, so we can guess the carburetor will be gummed up, but we need to make sure that it still runs before we go any further. The air filter will need to be replaced, but it should still run even with the dirty one that's on there. Next, we'll check to see if the fuel tank has any gas in it. More than likely it won't. Well, there's no gas in it, but I can see there's some debris in the tank. Hopefully the screen at the bottom will catch most of it before it goes into the carburetor. So the first real problem is that the pull rope is broken and the handle is gone, so we'll definitely need to fix that. Next, we'll check the oil to make sure that there was some in the engine when it was put up. Also, we want to make sure that we don't have to add any just in case it fires up on us. So the oil level is a little bit low, but at least there's some in there. Next, check to make sure that the brake cable isn't seized. Carefully squeeze the handle and make sure it moves like it's supposed to. Well, it is moving like it's supposed to, so let's move on to the next step. I want to make sure that the engine isn't seized, so what I'll do is disconnect the spark plug and turn the engine by the blade. Make sure that you have the brake cable tied down so the flywheel brake isn't on. And luckily the engine isn't seized, and the bottom oil seal isn't leaking either. The next thing we're going to do is remove the top part of the engine where the recoil is and take care of the rope. There's a bolt in the front and 2 bolts in the back that are underneath the fuel tank. Now, if we take a look underneath the top cover, we can see that there's been several mud dauber nests underneath here. At least they're all gone. There's even been some spider activity as well. Okay, before we restring the recoil, we need to make sure that there's not a problem with it. To do that, you'll need to spin the pulley a few times in either direction and make sure it tightens up and springs back. Unfortunately, it looks like there's a big problem with it. It seems like the spring is broken, which is bad for this type of recoil. Its design makes it really hard to replace the spring. It can be done, but I'm not going to do it in this video. So to deal with this problem, it's easier if we just replace the entire recoil assembly. In a Briggs engine, that would be kind of tough, but on this Tecumseh engine, it's really easy. After taking the plastic cover off, we can see that there's only 2 screws holding the assembly to the cover. We just need to remove the 2 screws and then replace it. Now, before we go any further, we need to make sure that the engine will start. We can still do this even without a recoil if we use a drill and the appropriate size socket to spin the engine. Reconnect the spark plug and put some gas in the throat of the carburetor, and then spin the engine in the correct direction. And fortunately for us, it does run. So now we can move on to looking at the carburetor. But before we do that, I just remembered that I already have an engine cover from a Craftsman Eager 1 mower. Now it had the same engine, so that means that I don't have to wait for one to come in the mail. I could probably just install the Eager 1 cover on the engine, but it wouldn't look like it belonged there, so we're going to swap the recoil assemblies instead. Now start by removing the 2 screws on the original recoil. And before we install the other recoil, we're going to make sure that the replacement part still works like it's supposed to. I'm not sure why, but I get a couple of comments here and there about cleaning things before I install them. I don't think it matters as to how well it works, but I'll go ahead and clean the cover before I install the recoil. And once that's done, let's move on to the carburetor. We're going to remove the bowl and the bowl nut first, just to see how bad it is inside before we take the whole carburetor off the engine. Now on these Tecumseh engines, the bowl has to go on a particular way. So what I'm going to do is mark the bowl to the carburetor so that I can put it back on the same way it came off. This isn't a good sign. The brown stuff coming out of the carburetor is some sort of corrosion, which means the carburetor might be beyond repair. Now, I'm not going to give up just yet though, because the next step is clearing the holes in the brass jet. So all the other holes were pretty clear, but the one in the middle had some definite resistance to it, so that's where our blockage must have been. So this is the most important part. We're going to remove the bowl and see just how bad it is inside the carburetor. Wow, this looks absolutely horrible. It looks like someone put some gas in there recently, and the dry, crusty stuff that's at the bottom of the bowl has now turned into mud. Well, you can guess what we have to do next. We're going to have to clean the carburetor the best we can to get it to work. If we can't get it to work, we'll order a new carburetor, which will take a few days. Another reason why your mower might not be starting is a wet air filter. If it's wet, it can't breathe. You can remove the filter like we did and test it without the filter to make sure it works first before getting a new one. Well, after removing the pin and the float, we can see just how serious the problem is. Even the needle retaining clip has rusted away, and most of the corrosion, well, is absolutely intense. Well, there's no point in waiting, so let's start scraping off the scaly stuff and then wire brushing the rest of it. This is going to take some time though. Now we're going to need to replace the needle seat because I can see that it's very damaged. If we don't replace the seat, then the carburetor will leak gas into the engine and all over the deck as well. The new seat goes in the carburetor with the pleated side into it first and the smooth side facing outward. So here's a new needle retaining clip. Now without this piece, the needle will not move away from the seat, and so no fuel will enter the carburetor bowl. It's now time to reinstall the needle and the float and then reassemble the carburetor. If the bowl O-ring is damaged or cracked, you might want to consider getting another one, otherwise the carburetor will not deliver gas into the engine. Now don't forget to check that the float actually moves up and down before installing the bowl. And then also don't forget to install the bowl according to that mark that we put on it at the beginning. We're almost done with this repair. The last couple things you'll need to do is reconnect the governor linkage and then put the bolts on that hold the carburetor to the intake tube. The next thing to do is reinstall the top cover and its bolts and replace the fuel tank, and then reconnect the fuel line to the fuel tank. Now before putting gas into the fuel tank, make sure that the fuel cap has this bell underneath it. Otherwise the tank won't vent properly and the carburetor will run out of gas. I'm going to show you how the engine starts up with no editing so you can see exactly what happens. Well, it runs, but it's not perfect. I will let you know, though, that after filming, I did mow with it, and as time went on, it did get better and smoother. So my question to you is, would you even try cleaning a dirty carburetor like this one, or just replace it? If time is money for you, I would suggest replacing it. But if you had time, what would you do? I'm really interested in your opinion. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate your time. Please feel free to ask any questions, and I hope to see you in my next video.